Welcome to the House of Ham. I am Bob, WV7W, and I just got this box in the mail from Elecraft, and I'm excited to share the contents. First is the KX2 antenna, but that's going to be a topic for another video. What I'm going to share with you today is this, which is the KX IBC2. This has been on many KX2 owners' wish lists for quite a while. This little board will allow you to charge the internal battery from the external jack of the radio. I really like the internal battery, and it works really well, including the ability to get 10 watts out, which is something others like the ICOM IC705 cannot do. It keeps the radio setup nice and small, and having to take the back off the radio and pull it out to charge it is kind of a pain. Well, today that's no longer an issue. The other thing I was wanting was a real-time clock, so at a quick glance I could get UTC for my log. Previously, the KX IO2 was the solution to that, and I was just about ready to order one of those when Elecraft announced this guy, and that solves both problems. Let's go over to the bench and do the install and configuration of this board.
As we go through this process, we're going to use Elecraft's instructions, and so first we're going to make sure power's off and no power supply is connected to it. Now we need to open the bottom cover and remove the battery. If you're like me, you can smile a little bit because you know this may be the last time you have to do this for a while. I disconnected the speaker connector so I can get this cover out of the way. It may not be required, but certainly a good idea. I do not have the KX IO2, so I can go ahead and check that box off. Now that we have that done, we need to remove the left side panel. To do that, we're going to remove the two screws that are towards the front face of the radio. I did not have a KXIO2, so I just need to remove the screws and the temporary hardware and set that aside. Make sure you keep these screws separate from the others. They are different. Now that the radio is apart, we can go ahead and install the KX IBC2 module. This envelope contains the pins and the sleeve that we'll be using in a minute. And here is the actual board. You'll notice this board only has 3 connectors, as where the radio has 4. The one does not get used. So go ahead and you have to align the LED with the hole in the back of the radio, and then you got to be very careful as you align these pins up, and it's a little tricky to get it lined up, but you don't want to go and bend the pins. So get it lined up and then gently push the board onto the pins. It does take a little bit of finagling. Now that we've installed that, we can go ahead and reattach the left panel. Once you get the panel aligned, go ahead and put in the 2 screws that attach the panel to the radio first. And then once you have those installed, then you've got to carefully align the holes of the module. The inserts are soft aluminum, so don't do anything that could possibly cross-thread them. I had to push the board gently towards the panel to get the screw and the aluminum insert to line up. Go ahead and get the pins and the little plastic sleeve out and set those aside. Now here's where you have to make a decision. Do you want to do method 1, which is what they recommend for a field install? I did not opt for that because I wanted to be able to remove this module without having to desolder. So I went ahead and did option 2, which is to install those pins onto the board and then be able to plug the board cables into that. The instructions caution you not to install the pins all the way flush to the board. This was a little easier said than done. They kept falling through. So I opted for a round toothpick that I could stick in the end of the pin, and then I just had to figure out a way to be able to hold the toothpick up. And what I finally decided on was, well, why not just get another toothpick and wedge it in behind the pin, and that would hold it up. And that's what I ended up doing, and it actually worked out pretty good. Now before inserting the pin, I recommend sticking a little flux in there. I did not do it on this pin, but I did on the next one. And then what I did is I just heated the pin with the iron and then stuck the solder in there and let it melt down into the hole. Now I got lucky and my hole for the E pin did not have any solder in it, so my pin went in easily. Actually, too easy. It was falling down as well. I did, however, remember to stick some flux in here this time. I think it'll just get you a better flow of the solder. But what I ended up having to do is to go ahead and get the iron in there and heat up the pin, get some solder on it, and then hold the toothpick up to get the pin so that it wasn't down against the board. Next, I cut a piece of the tubing. I cut it deliberately a little bit long, but still less than half of what was there. I then slipped it over the pin on the board and inserted the wire into it to get an idea of where I needed to cut it to the right length. I then trimmed it to length, and then while I was at it, went ahead and cut the second piece to the exact same length. I then installed it over each of the 2 pins, and then I started with the red wire, the further one out, because the white goes over the top of it. So I inserted it into the pin, made sure it was fully seated, and then kind of carefully bent it out of the way. And do the same thing for the white wire. This one's a little bit shorter, so you got to be even more careful when you get it out of the way that you don't break it off. And that completes the install. So now what we can do is go ahead and put the battery back in, plug it back in, and carefully tuck the wires out of the way. Then reattach the speaker connector. Make sure you've got everything oriented right. It'll only go in one way, but you do got to make sure it's right, and you don't want to force it. Then carefully tuck those wires in out of the way and reinstall the panel, making sure you don't pinch any of the wires. And we are ready to fire this up and check it out. And it powers on normal. That's a good thing. Next, we'll go into the menu system, and the first thing we need to do is make sure that the KXIO2 is set to not installed, and it is. And then we need to go to KX IBC2 and set that to NOR. Figured I'd go ahead and go into the time setting and set the clock. So press 1 to set the hour, and then turn the VFO knob to set it the way you want. It was 11:59 here. Then 2 for the minutes. And I thought it was kind of odd that it says 11:64. And then I set that to the right time, which was 11:48. And then that's it. And we're ready to go ahead and check out the rest of the charging features. But before I do that, let me power cycle this thing and make sure that it holds time. And it does. Excellent. Now I'll plug in an external 13-volt power source, and look at that. We've got the charging light, just what we want to see. So let's go ahead and turn it off and make sure it continues to charge. And it does.
So that install wasn't bad at all. Now I can charge my battery without having to remove it. And I have a real-time clock set to UTC for my next park or summit activation. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please hit that like button. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing and tap that notification bell to know when my next video comes out. Until next time, 73.